All right, let's get into this, Kyle. I think when we think about retirement, we think about, putting money away, and we think about budgeting. And I think
Mm,
people are scared to go like, "Hey, what are you like I know I should have a budget, but I maybe don't have a budget right now,
hmm
or I have a rough idea of my budget, but I don't know its specifics." And I think what we are talking about here today is extrapolating that and going like, are you going to be able to say retire when you want to retire, or some people will call it retire early. We've talked about the FIRE movement,
hmm
financial independence, retire early. In this episode, we want to talk about like how much do you really need, and are you thinking about that number? Because there is a number right now that you can kind of figure out what is the number today that if I have this in, say, passive income, then I'm great. Like I could retire, because if you can match your expenses and with, say, your passive amount of income, then that's your, and we this is not our term, but this is your FIRE number. This is your financial independence retire early number. Because if you offset that, then you don't have to bring in any new income. Your passive income is going to pay those expenses. So what we
Right.
want to explore is not necessarily the FIRE number. We want to talk about the FIRE number, but we want to go like, do you know what your FIRE number is? And if not, are you planning to know? And what would be the FIRE number when you want to retire? And then maybe you don't even want to retire. So we're going to
Right.
get into all of those things today, specifically thinking about how much you're planning to do to offset your expenses with the income you have, so that you have the freedom to do whatever you want to do. If you're a business owner, if you're on a pension plan, if you're not on a pension plan, we want to talk all things like that today. You're in the right
hmm
spot if you want to hear it.
I love it. I love it. We discussed how we were going to talk about whether you have a real retirement plan or just a retirement prayer going on. And we actually went back to the stats, and actually something that jumped out at me, we weren't planning on talking about budgeting at all, but the reality is that what we
I think you've got
found,
to.
and this was from an Ipsos article, it says 3 in 10 Canadians say they've never created a budget for themselves or their household. So right there, that like kind of stopped me in my tracks when I was trying to think of like, okay, it can only, when I pull the numbers for who has a retirement plan or who's actually thinking about retirement, my gut suggests that it's probably lower than that amount, simply because if I'm not thinking about my budget now, how am I actually thinking about my budget later? Like future
Hmm.
Kyle. I actually don't know who future Kyle is going to be. I didn't know who I am today 10 years ago. And,
Mm.
the same is going to continue repeating. So fundamentally there's a challenge there, and that's a really really scary thing. And we actually pulled numbers here, and we found that in Canadian households there are goals, financial goals, and this was from another article. Actually, I think it's the same article from the Ipsos article there, where according to polls they had 17% of households has had saving for retirement as their primary goal. They had 34% were it was their secondary goal. However, if that's the case, though, first of all, those are really low numbers, meaning like less than half of Canadians actually have that as one of their main financial goals or secondary goals. So that's scary. But then also, if we know that 3 out of 10 Canadians aren't actually like planning a budget or considering a budget. I've already admitted I'm not great at budgeting. You're way better at it than I am. But what I do see is I see the money coming in and I see the money going out. Some of it's a mystery to me on where we're spending it, which I know is
That
not good.
would bug
But
me.
why I'm saying that is because there's people like you listening, John, and there's people like me listening. And
For
for
sure.
both of these types, right, you have to at least be thinking. And in my mind, when I look at it and I go, if I enjoy my lifestyle now, I want to at least be considering how much money I have going out the door right now. And I'm not even worried about the fact that some of those expenses are related to the kids, some of those expenses are related to my mortgage, some of those expenses are related to things that may or may not be there in the future. But what I will say is that I have a funny feeling that even though we spend a lot of money on our kids or on our mortgage or on some of these other things, is that when I'm at that point in time where maybe the kids aren't here, or maybe I want to spend more time with my wife, I know I'm not the type of person that's going to save that extra money and then go sit in a corner and read a book like you, John. But I'm gonna
I feel
probably
like that was a
find a
shot.
place. Yeah. You like you like reading and that sort of thing.
You like
Me,
reading.
I like fill the time. So the moral of this story, though, is that if you can at least understand your spending habits now and use that as an actual starting point to just try to project out into the future to go, like, at what point, like, when will I be at a place where I have enough income generating assets, be it through a decumulation process, meaning I have to sell stocks or I have to
Hmm.
sell
Okay.
assets, or whether it's actually passive income coming from assets, be it dividends, be it rental income, be it whatever it is, for me to be able to go, wow, the amount of money that I spend on average every month or every week or every year, however, you want to look at it, is now able to be covered by those assets and for a long enough period of time where I won't feel as though I'm running out of money and having to actually shift my lifestyle. So this is something that we're going to nudge you towards, and we're going to give you some steps, like action steps here today, that we want you to think about for yourself. And the first one is going to be, how much money are we spending? If you know that the spending is going to change between now and that place when you maybe aren't working so much, again, I want to warn people, if you're working a lot, if you work 40 hours a week, if you are like us, business owners and entrepreneurs, where we work a lot of times more than 40 hours because we enjoy it,
Hmm.
if you all of a sudden don't have that time being eaten up, are you going to be doing things that cost more money? Are you going to be doing things that don't cost money? Because here's the thing, right now, you're probably committing a good chunk of your life each week to making money. And you're basically going to pull the rug on that. And then you're going to have to also figure out, what do I do with that extra time? And what's that going to look like from an expenditure standpoint? Do I like very expensive things to fill my time? Or do I actually enjoy things like exercising more or going on walks or just hanging around the house and gardening, right? Like, these are things that we have to think about, but at least start with, what am I spending now and how will I at least be able to replace what I'm spending now given what I know?
Yeah. And I think not, you want to kind of figure those out. Yeah, you don't have to get to the same detail of like where each dollar is going at this point, especially if you're trying to do future planning. But I think if you are trying to plan for the future, and if you're listening to this show, you are, right? Like, you are going, I want to build my wealth. I want to get a grasp on, accumulating the assets that I have, say, a reach around, like I can reach or bring into my ecosystem. Like we are in this process of trying to figure out what that is. And if you are on that pathway to it being like, I am trying to build my financial future. I am trying to get to a place where I don't have to be really concerned about money. I want those assets to build so that I have, say, that passive income. If you are on that pathway, then, and if you have not done the thinking to know what your financial number is right now, like, I like to go, like, if I did the decumulation strategy right now, how much would that cover of my, expenses, the money that's going out? If I extrapolate that in 10 years, like, this is a good thought exercise. It might not even be a thought exercise. It might be like an actual exercise where you have to get some numbers together. Because if you haven't done that, then the question is, are you actually on the pathway to financial freedom? Or are you
Mm-hmm.
actually on the pathway to build your financial wealth in the future? Because I'm going to argue, if you don't know that number, then you're not. Like, you're not there. You're not in a
Right.
position to make good decisions around your investments. And I would say you're not in a great position to say decide whether that asset or that rental property over there is worth a buy if you don't know what that number is, because it's like you're throwing spaghetti at the wall to go, hey, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. I heard I should do that. Heard I should do that,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to go ahead and do it when not know what your intentionality is in the end. Because I think you have to have a very clear picture of what you want, say, 10 years from now looks like, 20 years from now looks like. And and I'm going to push you on this. Have a number so that you're like, I know that that's the number that I should hit, and if I hit it, I'm good.
Yeah.
But you have to have that number so that you can make a good financial decision now. And I like to reverse engineer it to go, okay, if that's the number, then with inflation and say time value of money, what's the value of that today? And am I set up to hit it by then?
I
Because if
love it.
I'm not, then why am I buying a rental property? Or like maybe that's the plan. But I mean, like if if I don't have the amount of money to contribute here, here, and here, like what am I doing to get there? Like what's my next step to get on that pathway? If I add this asset in, okay, that gets me a little bit closer. And what's my 3 year goal? Like you have
Right.
to have these plans if you are serious about achieving, say, FIRE, right?
Right.
And that's assuming you want to retire early.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We almost think of it as more like FIRN,
Burn
FIRN,
doesn't
like we're
sound so
looking for
nice.
like the retirement number. Because I know for you and I, John, and Matt's the same, is like we have actually no ambition to stop doing what we're doing. Like we are doing this because we are passionate about the work
And I
we
used
do.
to. I used
Yeah.
to, right? Like I was the person be like, oh, I'm gonna hit 55, or I think my number, my age was gonna be 56. That was when I was a teacher, and I was like, I'm gonna like retire, and I'm gonna go on the beach, and I'm gonna read, and I'm gonna use my pension, my defined pension plan. I didn't have to do all that thinking if I had a pension plan, you know. And actually, I think in the numbers you reported, maybe all those teachers aren't even part of that because they don't even have financial goals for the future because they have these defined pension plans that do it for
Right.
them. Like,
Right.
like I was that person, and I've completely redesigned. I almost want to shake myself to go like I would think I would have had a hard time getting to that point and then not having a plan to do every day or work towards
Totally.
building. And we've said this many, many times is to say like you can't unlearn what you learn. So when you're on this pathway to learn as much as you can about building your financial, independence, then you can't unlearn it. And then therefore is like, am I gonna like retire? And I'm using
Right.
air
Yeah.
quotes here if you're listening, but I mean like am I going to retire and do nothing and travel? Like people say, I'm going to retire and travel. And I'm like, you're going to travel for a certain amount of time and then what?
Right.
So
Exactly.
like, what is the plan when you to retire? And if you're on this pathway like we are, we're gonna probably go out on a limb here and say, if you're like us, you're going to be like, what does that look like? And I'm probably going to continually try to build my assets.
Right, absolutely. And that's another piece I'd like to chat about, a little later here in the episode. And so you've identified something really important is like thinking about who or what you want to be set up for when you get to retirement. I think reading articles and just, obviously informing yourself is helpful, but you just have to be cautious because again, it's like when you talk to a retiree, every time you chat to a retiree, you should ask them sort of like, how's it working out? And of course, you don't want to get too personal where they, sort of start crying, about how miserable things are for them. But the reality is that if I go from one lifestyle and then literally the very next week, once I retire, my income drops to a point where it's like hard to live a comfortable or an enjoyable lifestyle as compared to when you were working. That's a problem, right? So for us, we want to make sure that we know what we're spending, at least know what you're spending now, and you can adjust up or down for that. That's a you thing. So I want to make sure that I at least can maintain what I'm spending now, despite the fact that I think my expenses will go down based on children not being here. But I will also have this big gap of time. So being the guy I am, being the financially sort of, we'll call it wanting security, financial security to the max. I would rather be over planned than under planned. That's just who I am. So a question you have to ask yourself is, okay, what am I doing now? So if you know this number and I go, okay, well, I'm going to need X number of dollars. If we use the 4% rule, which a lot of people, we've had an episode about it. We can go back and find the episode number and put it in the show notes. But if you use the 4% rule, the 4% rule is this idea that you can essentially use 4% of your assets and be good for most likely be good. That's the hard part. It's not
Right.
100% success rate. It's like, I think it's like 80 something percent of the time you will not run out of money over 30 years. So that's the other hard part. So if you're 50 and you're thinking about this, like I'm hoping to live to 110, like that's 60 more years, right? But if you're only hoping to live to 80, then hey, it might be a good rule to use. So you've got to figure out what that number is in order to achieve that goal. So if your expenses are 100,000 per year, then you're looking at about $2.5 million being good for about 30 years. But here's the caveat. It's 100,000 of after-tax dollars. So where's that money? Is it all in a TFSA? Well, that's going to be hard to do. Like you better, be 10xing your investments in there real fast. If it's all in your RSP, then you're going to be getting taxed on that amount each and every year. So you have to be cautious about this fact that is, if it's spendable money, this is after tax dollars or borrowed funds if you're using a leverage strategy, as real estate investors like ourselves often use. So that's really important. Figure out that number. If it's $200,000 a year, you're looking more like 5 million. But again, that's assuming that everything's going well over those 30 years and that you're properly designed, like your portfolio is properly designed to deal with down years and so forth. We have an episode about that, using insurance as a strategy to help you in those down years so you could stay aggressive and continue to reach your goals. But now here's another question. So if John, I need X number of dollars before I can start confidently pulling the amount of money I want for my FIRN number, so to speak, or to cover those expenses. Another question is like, what are your rates of return typically right now? Because here's what is problematic. First of all, people I chat with oftentimes don't know how much they are earning in their investments. And those who do oftentimes like to share the one bucket that has a certain rate of return. But remember, that's not the average of your entire portfolio. So what I mean by this is that if you have like 20% of your investments in, say, a growth ETF, and on average, it's earning 12% per year or something like that, that's great. But if you also have another 20% bucket that is, earning 2% per year, we were looking at a client recently who had a large chunk in this 2% bucket. Well, that's pulling from the 12% bucket. That average is coming down. So you need to be aware of like, what is the average rate of return that I can anticipate based on what I'm doing now? Can I improve that? Maybe, but we want to make these assumptions based on today's numbers, based on your reality. If you're in real estate like we are, running the numbers routinely, just buying a property and then letting it roll is not the way to go. We want to see how have markets shifted? What is the value of this property? Know what is happening and when will we achieve that goal if we continue to go on this path. Now, as we calculate that number, you need to pause and ask yourself, okay, if I need X number of dollars, let's say it's $5 million that you have for your particular goal. All right. You need a $5 million portfolio. And you know that based on current returns that you'll need to contribute a certain amount of dollars each and every year, month, week, however you want to approach it. You now have to start asking yourself, am I actually on track, and on track by when? So is this a number that you're going to get to by age 65? Is it an age or a goal you're going to get to by age 55? Or do you have a goal sooner? We have a goal sooner to reach our financial freedom number. We want to get there sooner, but with no goal of actually changing anything. We're just hoping to continue doing what we're doing because we enjoy doing it, but knowing that that goal is sort of checked off of our list. So these are things that we all have to really understand and trust. The last piece, once you figure out that number that you have, is really starting to think about like, what sort of asset classes are we going to do this in? Is it all going to be in the markets? Are we going to use index ETFs as the plan? If you want to go with dividend stocks, right? That I think is a slower way than it needs to be to get there. Maybe down the road, you might turn to dividend stocks. But currently, if you want growth, you probably want to do something a little bit different. However, whatever your plan is, as you're doing this, you have to also think about what will actually happen when we start to take advantage of this asset bucket that you've been accumulating in order to help you sort of live financially free and not need you to work if you chose not to work. What I mean by that is, will it be a decumulation strategy, meaning I have to sell assets in order to receive that income? Noting that with selling certain assets, there may be capital gains, likely capital gains tax that we have to account for. Is it going to be a dividend approach where, hey, I own all of these different companies and every month or every quarter, every year, I'm getting a certain amount of dividends being paid out, keeping in mind that dividends, again, can also be taxable depending on which bucket they're in and how they're coming out to you? Or is it going to be something like real estate, right? I have real estate. Am I going to sell the property, experience a capital gain, potentially experience all of the additional depreciation amounts that we now have to deal with on the back end, all of these things that I have to deal with when I sell a property? Or am I going to utilize a leveraged approach? Am I comfortable and confident with that approach? So thinking about the psychological pieces is really important as well, because what you'll find is that as people approach their financial freedom years, they'll get to this place where they've worked their entire life towards hitting this goal. And then the very day that they start to pull money from those assets, what they see happening is their net worth starts to slowly decrease depending on the situation, right? So if I'm pulling from assets, no longer is my net worth increasing each year. You actually start to see it decreasing each year. And am I okay with that? Do I feel comfortable with that? As a real estate investor, sometimes I get a little spooked with the idea of selling a property because I'm like, but I had X number of doors and now I have X minus one door or X minus five doors or whatever it is when we're selling. These are things that can psychologically sort of, alter how you behave once you get to those goals. So in this particular episode, I hope that you, my friends, the Canadian Wealth Seeker community, are thinking about your retirement plan and actually thinking about it as a plan instead of as a prayer. Earning a high income, having a successful business, however it is that you're choosing to go about things, you can have a high level of success now, but still be using a retirement prayer method if you're not actually thinking about and planning for the spending habits you have now, the spending habits that you may have later, or the spending habits that you want to maintain later, and for how long, as well as how much I should actually be contributing to quote unquote pay myself first. Do not blindly do 10% or 15% of your income, because let's be honest, if you do 10% of your income and you earn 50% returns per year, you're in a very different place than if you do 10% of your income and earn 2% per year, right? So, of course, those are extremes. But at the end of the day, knowing what your goal is and then working backwards to make sure that there's a clear, concise plan is going to help set you up to not only give you clear goals that you can work towards and you can actually make happen, but also to make sure that down the road, you don't get there and start suddenly realize that everything you were hoping for or praying for actually didn't come true for you. If you are a Canadian Wealth Secrets listener and you're listening until now, you're probably interested in this topic. And that might mean that you're looking for a little bit of hand holding as you think about your retirement plan. We want to help take that prayer and turn it into a more sustainable, concrete plan for you and those you care about. So feel free to reach out to us so we can hop on a call and help you with the next step in that real estate, or I should say retirement planning journey, not necessarily real estate, although that is one of our favorite asset classes. We'll help you with your plan and make sure that you have some actionable steps in order to help you get closer to that goal. All right, my friends, reach out at CanadianWealthSecrets.com/discovery and book that call today. Once again, it's CanadianWealthSecrets.com/discovery. And we look forward to hanging out with you next time. Just as a reminder, this content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. And John Orr is a mortgage agent with Bricks Mortgage, license number M23006803. And Kyle Pearce, that is me, is a licensed life and accident and sickness insurance agent and the VP of Corporate Wealth Management with the PanCorp team. including corporate advisors and Pan Financial.